Welcome! You are listening to the CRM Success Show, where you will hear from CRM executives who have overseen some of the most interesting and complex CRM implementations. Your hosts, David Masri and Kiro Whitey, will be bringing you real stories, real insight. Follow along on social media for updates on new episode releases, exclusive content, and much more. Enjoy the show, and thanks for listening.
Welcome to the CRM Success Show, where we deep dive into CRM success and failure, delivering real stories with real impact. I'm Dave Masri.
And I'm Kiro Whitey.
And today we're talking with Andy Wirtner, the Senior VP / Director of Banking Solutions at PlainsCapital Bank. So welcome, Andy.
Thanks for having me.
So Andy, we're going to start you off real simple. Please give our listeners today an overview of your background and what you do for PlainsCapital Bank, please.
Sure, thanks. I've been with the bank since 2011, primarily focused in the Salesforce space here for the last 7+ years. Previously, I was working on the credit side of the house, doing credit underwriting, credit approval, and that part, but then transitioned into the CRM space with Salesforce. About 7 years ago. So my job here at the bank is to manage our Salesforce team, and then any other solutions that they decide to put under my purview. We've got a small business lending platform that I oversee as well. But really, it's using tech and any solutions in the tech space to help our bankers and our customers do their job and have great customer experiences.
Love it. And a real unique background, I would say, because you've been with the bank for almost 14 years, like you said, but you started out, I want to say front line in a way, credit analyst, and worked your way into tech. Do you want to share a little bit about that journey?
Sure. It's a pretty typical start if you're going to be in lending to start off as a credit analyst. Like you said, it is kind of a frontline position. You learn about credit policy, kind of the inner workings of the bank, what the do's and don'ts. You start getting exposure to different kinds of products and the offerings of the bank, whether it be commercial real estate or C&I lending. So it's a great way to get a lot of exposure to the bank as a whole and work with seasoned lenders and other individuals to kind of teach you about banking and how it works. And really that foundation is what naturally led me into the Salesforce space to begin with.
Amazing. And you started Salesforce, you mentioned 2017, right? So you did about 6 years with the bank, working your way up from credit to portfolio, and then you got your foray into Salesforce. So how did that come about? Was it because someone left and you kind of filled that space? Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah. So obviously there's some natural overlap. We were already using Salesforce at the bank, primarily as a pipeline tool. But it integrated with our credit decisioning platform. So I was already familiar with Salesforce. And by the time that I moved into that portfolio management role, I had a lot of interaction with the individual that led our Salesforce team and our Salesforce group before that. So we naturally had a lot of collaborations on places where we could see where, from the credit side, Salesforce could help out. So we started collaborating on projects over time. And that was my first introduction really into Salesforce. So I started learning the platform on the side, doing trailheads, and then working with that team kind of on the side on different projects. And eventually, over time, that led me to get certified as an admin because I saw the possibilities of the platform. And then the individual that was running the group left to pursue other opportunities. So that was a gap, and that position was offered to me at that time, and it was a great career move for me, I feel.
Not look back. I think so. I take away two aspects there. I take away a natural curiosity to learn, upskill, improve, and be the best you can be by going out there at the time, getting certified. Maybe it wasn't a requirement, right? But you did it anyway. And then seizing your opportunity when the door opened. Would you say that's fair?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've always been like a curious person, likes to learn, likes to find new things, learn new things. So that's Salesforce is a natural fit for that, with all the possibilities and all the new um, tools that they implement all the time. So I think a big thing for me too is I was able to leverage that background as a credit analyst and a credit underwriter and a credit manager to, help guide some future direction for Salesforce once I took it out, just outside of the the more, in the box uh, pipeline tool, kind of take it in different directions from there.
How important do you think that background served you? Let's say on a scale of 1 to 10, how successful, how important was it for the credit analyst background leading to your success in that role when you inherited the Salesforce org and you knew the users and how they used it? But like on a scale of 1 to 10, how important was that for you? And the reason I ask that is because sometimes people, they want to work with a bank, but they don't have the banking industry experience and they get
Mhm.
overlooked for a role. I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, just to tack on to that question, how strong was your technical background before switching? And do you think, I guess if you had a stronger or more technical, coming from technical role, you might have been in a better or maybe a worse place?
Right. No, those are great questions. I think for me and personally, it was a huge. So I one on a 1 to 10 scale, I'd probably say that it was a 7 or an 8. Was really critical at the time because, like you mentioned, I already knew the major players. I knew the processes they were using in their day to day, and that helped me kind of outline an initial roadmap. That being said, banking is one of those industries where it's highly regulated, a lot of rules. So that means there's a lot of processes and procedures. So that can be overwhelming to somebody that's maybe coming into the space. But the advantage is that the business already has these processes and procedures figured out. So it's good from a technical perspective because you can take those processes and procedures and you can put them into the platform and have the platform do a lot of that work or put more controls or automate things because you've already have these highly defined processes. So I wouldn't say that you need to have it. I just think it definitely helped me in the beginning. And then to answer the tacked on question there, I went to Purdue, and my degree is called industrial management, and essentially that's a finance degree with a blend of an engineering degree on it. So in my course studies, I was introduced to things like C programming, MATLAB, Python, some of those other programming type languages. So I was familiar with those at least. So I would say my tech skills they maybe weren't the super strongest, but I definitely had exposure to them and at least the concepts of software development and those kind of things going into it.
Good. And then, so the bank's on Salesforce since 2013. You picked up the business from a lead perspective in 2017. What did you inherit in terms of size at that time in 2017, in terms of like licenses and what were you using? It sounds like primarily Sales Cloud at the time. Could
Yeah.
you could you could you share a bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So we had around 200. I think it was a little less than 200 users at the time. I think maybe we're close to maybe 170 or somewhere around there. And yeah, the primary use case was Sales Cloud. We're using it for a pipeline, use it for a pipeline tool. And we did have a small Service Cloud implementation at that point too, but there was maybe only 10 users using that at the time. So yeah, basically a Sales Cloud shop in the beginning.
Okay. And where is it today in terms of, without going into all the detail, because I know we're going to cover that in a second, but where is it today in terms of users, products, and size?
Sure. So we're closer to 800 users, or maybe a little bit over now. I should have checked this morning because we're always seems like we're grabbing new teams into the platform. So 800 users, and now basically the question is not who's on Salesforce at the bank; it's who isn't. We've definitely crossed that threshold where the majority of the people at the bank are on Salesforce. So that includes lenders, lending assistants, treasury management, merchant, private banking, our wealth group, our branch managers, our CSRs on the retail side are all on Salesforce. And then a lot of those back office groups that also support those teams. So like deposit operations, loan operations, are all in the platform as well. So definitely a much broader audience than we first started, but the part of the fun part is kind of putting the pieces together and bringing in new teams and realizing how you can leverage your existing implementation with your new group, and then help round out that customer 360 experience that Salesforce is always talking about, right? For your own internal users, just makes the platform better with every group you add on.
I know Maz has a question as well, and I'll hand it over to you in a sec. But a 4x growth, always curious, how big was your team when you started with 180 users, and how big is it now? Like, did that also 4x grow, or was it a case of doing more with less?
So for a long time, it was 2. Then when we started adding on groups, it became 3, and now we're actually, as of September last year, we are at 4. So there's 4,
Nice.
including myself, and they were all primarily admins, certified admins. Is the primary. We don't have any devs on the team. That being said, our parent company, Hilltop Holdings, does have some developers that are deployed there. So in the event that we actually need development work, we have some shared resources that we can leverage.
Good.
Okay, awesome. So you said 800 users, and you're managing it with 4 people, and
Yes.
you're able to also roll out new features, not just.
Yeah. It's not just support. We're still running out new functionality as we can.
Yeah, it seems quite impressive. I think the recommendation is like what, 1 admin per 50, something like that.
I think it depends on customization, right? I think
Yeah.
100 to 150 per person is generally the guideline, right? But I guess, did you use partners and leverage partners as well throughout that, or during that time?
Yes. So some of the work, we have brought in third parties at a time. One of our big implementations was for on the retail side, our deposit origination is all done through a Salesforce UI. So if you go to our PlainsCapital site and you apply for a checking or savings, all that is managed through Salesforce, and that actual product offering was through a third party. So they built that, and that was a big chunk of the bank to bring on. Maybe about 200 of those users was due to that. But we're still there helping support that implementation on a day-to-day. We don't contract them for daily support or anything. It was basically the initial setup, and then any other new development that would come along there. And I'd love to see that the article that says where that recommendation is. So next time I have to do some hiring, I have a little bit more oomph when I say I need more help.
I'll get it over to you.
Yeah, awesome. So I think you said you have currently your branch managers on there, your CSRs, customer service reps, right? CSR.
Yeah.
Deposit and loan operations. I'm not sure what deposit operations is. Loan operations, I assume that's mortgages, business loans, typical banking stuff.
Yeah, and that's working from the on the loan origination side to actually get our loans, from just a deal to loan documentation to actually signing, closing the deal, and getting that booked into our core banking system. And then they also handle a lot of things like our exception tracking. Obviously when you go into a relationship with a bank, you're going to be required to provide regular financials, your tax returns, and all those things. So that group helps handle the ongoing collection of those documents over time. So that's kind of what loan operations does. And deposit operations does similar work, where there's certain documentation that we have to keep on the deposit side. But they also help manage setting up products, making sure that our core banking system is configured correctly to handle all those
So it's more like
things.
account opening type stuff. Or is it all homegrown, or using like Encino or some other banking package?
So
Or
on
FSC?
the loan side, we are integrated with a smaller company here out of Texas. It's called VSI, and they have a product called BankPoint, and they have a loan origination system that they call Extend that actually handles the actual boarding of our loan products into our core banking system. And that's actually pretty new. That's actually within the last couple of months that we launched that that offering. So yeah, essentially our credit underwriters go in along with our loan officers, and they actually input all the information like the terms and the rate and all that fun stuff before it actually gets boarded and booked into our core banking system.
Oh, real cool. So it's actually not a product I've heard of, believe it or
Mhm.
not. So sometimes we like to ask about product selection. Was there a product selection process with this Extend? How did you end up with that?
Yeah, so that team, so that part of the bank that's held by our credit department is the one that actually owns that piece. We do have an integration with Salesforce. We send pipeline information back and forth because that essentially serves as our our approval process, right?
Hmm.
Is what the primary thing that BankPoint does. It does other things, but from the Salesforce lens, that's the primary thing that it does. So we already had an existing relationship with them. Um, so I know we had looked at other tools, but since we already had the approval piece built in, it seemed just more like a natural fit for us to have that loan origination system built off of that engine.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, and my understanding is that I know you mentioned the CSRs. You recently had a big service cloud project. Was that the start of bringing your CSRs on? Tell us about that project. What it looked like before.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So before, our customer service group was kind of like an older tech stack, sorry. Basically just, calls coming into a queue, your traditional agents picking up the phone, helping your clients, with your typical requests that you would get from someone calling up a bank like, "Hey, I lost my debit card," or "Hey, what's my balance?" Really common things that people would call into. So the first step was getting them into the Salesforce tech stack to begin with. So we had an initial project was just to get a Service Cloud implementation up for that particular team. I know I mentioned another Service Cloud implementation before, and that was with another call center. So we actually have two call centers at the bank. One's tailored towards treasury management because their products are their own unique set of um, products, and they require specialized help. So we have a call center for that, and then we also have our call center for those things that I just mentioned. Like your more traditional, like I lost my debit card type request. So the first step was get them on to Salesforce in general. This so we did that a couple years ago. Set up case management. Um, at the time, we were using a third party soft phone called Ingenious to do screen pops. That was really the first introduction for that call center into the kind of the art of the possible for what the technology could do to help them in their day to day. Because before, essentially, our agents, they'd get a call and they just they'd see a number and maybe a caller ID name, but that was pretty much what they were presented with. They weren't presented with anything other than that. But so the first step was get them into Salesforce and start leveraging our customer data to our agents so that they have a little bit of an insight before that call comes up. So you do a screen pop with a customer record. You can see if that customer's called in, see what their case history was, all the great things that you can do in a Service Cloud implementation. So that was the first step, was to get them on the platform. And then the second step was what you mentioned, was taking it to the next level with Service Cloud Voice. And Service Cloud Voice is a joint offering between Amazon and Salesforce. So essentially, it's Salesforce's UI built on top of Amazon Connect, which is Amazon's call center, or they call it a contact center offering. So it brings the two together. And so what that did was that replaced our telephony soft phone on the Salesforce side, but then it introduced a whole suite of other features that our users used to have to go to another system to get, and also introduce some just net new features for our call center.
So take it through what this looks like, right? So I assume somebody calls in, you have, I guess, like an IVR type thing, which is built into the AWS contact center that verifies who the customer is, or does it based on the phone number? Then what? It navigates that record for you. Does it try to route the case? Like how much did you build this out?
Yeah. So we're not doing any kind of like KYC in the IVR that's taking place with the agent, but we are doing some routing ahead of time. I mean, the real basic example is obviously we have a lot of Spanish speakers here in Texas, so we have a queue that gets routed for Spanish or for English, and that's essentially how we have our agents skilled at this point. But there is that IVR that takes place ahead of time, that allows them to branch off, and if they want to, we do have offerings through our core banking system to for people to do things like check their balances, through the phone, and not actually speak to an agent. So there's a deflection that does happen before that. We just happen to see a lot of people just they prefer to talk to a person, so um, they make their way through that phone tree and eventually to our agent.
So you're not grouping by like department or anything like that, loans or deposits. It's just based on language.
Yeah, right now, because we don't we don't send a customer to a back office group. Our call center agents are trained to help with most of our basic needs that our customers are calling with. Like I said, account balances and those kind of things. They're able to do, or direct or create a ticket for the correct team to take care of. So they're really the triage group. But they do, from time to time, they will transfer calls to outside groups if they need to speak to a specific loan officer, or that they handle that as well.
Okay, awesome. So I'm not very familiar with Service Cloud Voice or Contact Center. Can you tell us like a bit about that? Like, why is that better than like just doing Open CTI and integrating it, right? What's the real advantage there?
Yeah. So before, we were using Cisco as our telephony system. We're using Salesforce for case management. And when you're trying to do things like either QC calls or trying to do any kind of de-escalation, on the agent side, it's really helpful to have all that information in context. So the big thing for us was, how can we get call data and call information into Salesforce, so that's available outside of someone switching between systems. So I'll give you a couple examples. So Service Cloud Voice out of the box, right, offers call transcription. So if you want to, you can have a component on the screen that actually is typing out what is being said. So if an agent needs to go back in the conversation, they can see like, oh, had I mentioned this yet, or what where did they say this, or or if a supervisor needs to listen into a call, they can drop into this voice call and they can see, okay, here's what's been discussed so far, and they can kind of have an idea of what they're stepping into in case they need to barge in. So that's a great example. That's functionality that we didn't have before, that this product offers, and so that's great. And also now, it also layers in the actual call recording itself. So if I go to a voice call, that's the name of the object in Salesforce, it's associated with the case. So if I pull up the case, I can see the case details that the agent wrote, and I can see the call that was associated with it. So everything's in context, because before you'd have to go, okay, I've got a case, I opened it up at this time, now I need to go into Cisco and I need to go find the call that was associated with this case. This takes all that out of it. So it's all together in context. And obviously you can see the advantages of that, because you pull up the case, you can hear the conversation, you can see the transcript, everything's right there. It just makes it a lot easier from an agent and a supervisor standpoint. And so now we've taken that to, and we're layering things like they previously were doing, they were scoring their agents, for monthly reviews and all that. And now that process, instead of going from like an Excel based process, we have that built in Salesforce as a custom object that we've layered on top of Service Cloud Voice, because they're there on the call. They can see the case, they can hear the recording, they can just go through their grading process, and boom, that grade is now associated with that voice call in that case. You're able to link everything together. It's just taking your data and just enriching it, right? That obviously you can tell that's what gets me excited about Salesforce is you just build on what you've already built, and the power grows exponentially as you continue to build it out.
So yeah, I mean it's real awesome. Particularly having the transcript there, like it's much easier to search. Are you planning on doing like any AI on top of this to get like sentiment analysis, flagging, right? Because that's an obvious next step, I think.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct, and that is something that's offered through that platform as well. We haven't deployed that at this, but sentiment analysis is something that Amazon Connect offers, and you can surface, in Salesforce, right? And but that's on our roadmap to look um, at this point. So, but yeah, you're absolutely right. That's another great way to layer it in, because if I recall correctly, it would show you actually in the omni-channel supervisor, like a supervisor view, where you can see all your agents talking. It would actually, flag certain conversations as maybe not going like you would want them to be going, using that sentiment analysis. So that's on the roadmap.
It's good option for escalation and things like that, right? But also
Mhm.
knowledge gaps as well for reps. If there's a common objection that's coming up or a query, it might be a quicker way to add some collateral about it, on a marketing campaign or put it on the website or whatever, right? Just to try and limit
Mhm.
that volume. So
Sure.
all exciting stuff around the whole agent force piece, right? It's all relevant AI agent force to these kind of environments. But I guess so. So my understanding with Service Cloud Voice, it came out 2019, 2020-ish, and really kind of took on about 18 months, 2 years after that. And the customers that we've supported who are using it, often they talk about the performance management aspect that comes along with that as part of the functionality capability. And you touched on it about, the one-to-ones with agents and the reviews. But I think that's a piece of the product that maybe doesn't get as much attention in terms of like the time save that it allows from that whole performance monitoring piece. Things like disconnected calls, if calls were missed by agents. So I'm curious, were there any kind of examples or metrics that you were tracking prior to using Service Cloud Voice, or were you just not able to do it? And then the second part is, what notably improved as a result of having that data and information through Service Cloud Voice?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because like you mentioned, um, some of those things weren't possible. Now some of those things are possible. Um, we used to have to go to out of Cisco basically, and we were at the mercy of Cisco to give us those kind of KPI type metrics that we were looking at, and based off of reports from our users, those weren't always as accurate as we would have hoped. There was some manual manipulation, and of course, as soon as you introduce any kind of manual manipulation, you're opening yourself up to human error and all that. So, what we've done now is that we've actually we're using um, Service Cloud Analytics, um, hooking it up to Amazon's data lake that brings in all the call information. So now we actually have a dashboard that's built inside of Salesforce on the agents and supervisors homepage, where they can see all their KPI metrics when they log in. So again, it goes back to that, we're bringing it all in one place. They're not having to go to somewhere else to get their metrics, and somewhere else to get their evaluation, somewhere else to get calls, and somewhere else to get case. It's all in the same place.
And I think as well, you can differentiate between what's external, what's internal a lot more easier as well. Because I remember one customer in particular, they actually found once they went live with Service Cloud Voice, they were they knew they were spending a lot of time on internal meetings, but when they got the data, they were like 40% of their time, their agent's time is internal, which is just crazy, right?
Yeah.
They could eliminate 1/3 of their workforce if they just reduced meetings internally, right? So that was a game changer, and they had this suspicion it was bad, but until they implemented Service Cloud Voice and had the actual data and numbers, they had no idea. So um, so good stuff. So in terms of the project itself, so we talked about kind of a bit about Service Cloud, why Service Cloud Voice, what it does, the capabilities, functionalities, benefits. Let's talk a bit about the actual project itself. So I guess real quick question. This is now a complete project for you, right? It's live. We're just talking about like enhancements now today in present time, correct?
Right. We actually launched the Service Cloud Voice piece in, I believe, October of last year. So it's been up and running for about 3-4 months now, and now we're in that post-production launch where we're fixing, those first high priority, those fast follower items that now that it's in the hands of everybody that they have been requested.
So there's no excuse. Adoption, was that fairly straightforward with this, or were the teething problems there any more than you were maybe anticipated, any less, that type of stuff?
We didn't have a lot of reports from it since, essentially all we were doing was switching out the soft phone. There wasn't too much. Obviously, there's extra things that are layered in there. So, but they were already used to case management because we had them on the platform for well over a year by the time they did that. So they were already kind of used to the idea of a case pop, and all their actual procedures in terms of the steps they take to open and close a case, those really were left unchanged. So we didn't really have, at least it wasn't reported to me, a lot of issues with adoption or this change management piece.
That is often one of the biggest headaches, I will say, change management adoption, that a lot of people we have on the show tell us about, right? And I'm sure for other parts of projects you've done in the past, maybe it was more so there, but with the Service Cloud Voice in mind, so it wasn't as painful as maybe it could have been. Let's say, how long did it actually take to like implement? Like how long from start to finish was it before you actually were live?
That's a good question. I wish I had my Azure board up so I could tell you the exact dates, but it wasn't like a multi-year project. I think it was spanned over 3-4 months. So
Okay.
not very long. I could get you the exact date if you want me to look it up, but it wasn't a huge timeline.
And you'd say it was a fairly quick win. Would it be fair to say it was a quick win for the business to spend a quarter on it roughly and get it live, and the benefits kind of paid off already?
Yeah, yes. I mean, not, so as a part of this too, besides the advantages we talked about bringing all that information together and starting to leverage it outward, there was also, we are going to have some cost savings eventually because we were able to, the between the licenses that we were getting rid of compared to the licenses that we were adding on Salesforce, it eventually ended up to a little bit of cost savings too. So that always helps if you can tell management that it's going to cost less and it's going to work better.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel comfortable sharing a rough percentage or estimate for now on
Oh,
what you think those cost savings would be?
it wasn't a huge cost savings. It wasn't huge. I don't remember what the dollar amount was, but it wasn't. It was less than. I want to say it's less than like $50,000 a year.
It
Cost
adds up though.
savings.
Yeah.
I mean, it like I said, it adds up, especially when you're trying to pitch someone on a new, like, oh, hey, we got to buy this new product. If you can actually show that it becomes cheaper, then that's always an easier win than hey, I need to add this Salesforce module and it costs $1 million. Sorry, we have to have it. That's a much
Yeah.
harder conversation to have.
I think I'd agree, and again, not only from a cost perspective, but you get a ton of additional benefits that you weren't getting previously, right? So that helps to make the business case. But I know sometimes decisions are made by the dollar amount, so I understand the predicament there. Maz, I know you had a question around integration. Do you want to ask that one?
Yeah, though I haven't done a tremendous amount of call centers. The one big one that I was involved in was with Weight Watchers. I was actually working there full time for a while. Um, and one of the things that they were doing was with app integration, so you don't have to necessarily pivot and to limit the time, like launching a secondary app, doing a search, and they had a dozen or so apps. I'm sure the bank also, right? I don't know how many apps your customer service reps have to log into. Maybe have a different app for loans than for deposits, or right, all of these various banking systems. Did you guys try to do anything to streamline all of that or integrate that somehow into to kind of streamline and make the service reps more efficient?
So all our service reps, they work out of one Salesforce app. So they're
Mhm.
not having to do any kind of context switching. And really what we did is when we first did that initial launch for them into Salesforce, uh, we started collecting that case data, and we used that case data to figure out where those integration points needed to be to help keep our agents inside of Salesforce as much as possible. So that way they're not having to go to different systems. And I'll give you an example because I've mentioned it a couple of times now. But the one part is how often people call our bank to figure out their loan balance. It happens quite a lot. It's actually probably our number one call and case type, right? You would think even though people have access to online banking, we have a mobile app, all all that. There's a lot of people that still like to call up and hear it from a person. So what we did was on our case pages, after the agent has gone through their verification process to our know your customer procedures, case gets created, and since we've linked the customer, we also have in Salesforce all their account data, their loans, their deposits. So we built a Lightning Web component that sits on the case page that pulls in that individual's related accounts, their loans, and also the transactions and other information around those transactions into the actual case itself. So that way, instead of having an agent go to our core banking system and try to find a deposit account, look at all the transactions, it just surfaces it right in Salesforce.
So you're doing it basically by bringing the data into Salesforce and exposing the data. But if they would have to actually do something in an app, they would have to log into the other app.
Yeah, right now. So primarily our any kind of integration that we have is typically just doing a get and it's pulling it back to display in
Yeah.
Salesforce for users. We haven't branched out into any puts or anything where we're putting data back in. Um, and right now there hasn't been a huge a need for it. Like I mentioned, we already addressed the biggest use case, which was help me find my transactions and help me find my balances. And that was a low hanging fruit. That was a big impact.
Yeah, it's always like that 80/20 rule. There's just a massive, and just each one of the use cases that you tackle knocks off just another massive number of calls.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. Go
If
ahead, back
if
to your.
if you were to give advice to someone in your shoes in a different org, different industry, I know there might be nuances on use cases and things like that, but just a general bit of advice prior to implementing Service Cloud Voice, now that you've gone through it, what would that be?
Definitely get familiar with the Amazon's data lake and their data structure. I think that was probably like the biggest hurdle.
Mhm.
Amazon's documentation is pretty good, but whenever you're involved in a joint venture between two companies, sometimes there's some finger pointing like this is this document. You need to go to this place or this place to find that documentation. So be prepared for some whiplash, sometimes back and forth as you start to navigate. But I think understanding the call data was something that I don't want to say we struggled with. Is that we knew the least about, right? Whenever you go into a system, sometimes you don't know how their data is structured and how they have tables. So just get real familiar with that. If you're going to do reporting on calls out of it, just get real familiar with the tables and how they those are all set up. Because it took us a while to figure out that internal and external calls were in completely different tables. So
Okay.
For a while there, we were like, we're missing calls. We know these call numbers aren't right. So what's going on? So yeah, get familiar with that data.
Your reps are reassuring you, hey, we're on the phone. So you wanna see that in the table, but makes
Yeah.
sense. I like my scale of 1 to 10 questions today. So I'm gonna ask you another 1 to 10 scale question. How happy were you with the implementation on a scale of 1 to 10? And then secondly, how happy do you think your service reps using Service Cloud Voice were on a scale of 1 to 10?
I think for myself, I've probably been about an 8. I've been fairly happy with it. It's not perfect. On the implementation side, it was pretty well streamlined, to be honest. Since we were using Amazon Connect as the telephony provider, they have options where you can bring your own telephony, and that becomes very custom. But since we were using more of their out of the box offering, really to stand up the call center and hook it up to Salesforce, it was actually just literally like a like a slider that you turn on in Salesforce. So implementation side on that point was pretty easy. I won't speak for the voice engineering people that had to recreate all the IVR stuff all to get into Salesforce, but they eventually they figured that out. But I feel like documentation was good, and they were able to jump on that pretty quickly as a new product offering. And in terms of our users, obviously we got some initial feedback, and that's why we're in this like post production launch iteration now, where we're trying to do some enhancements for them. I think I already mentioned like I said about the some of those calls were missing from reporting. That was a gripe, but that wasn't a hurdle that eventually we weren't able to figure out. But from like a easy usability, and we haven't had any complaints on it. I know they like having all that information in one place. That's for sure. So they've appreciated that.
Good. So we'll say they're probably 8 to 9 on the scale. We'll say.
Yeah. Sorry, I forgot to give you a number. Apologies.
No worries.
What were they using before?
What system were they using before?
Yeah.
Cisco, right? I think you
Yeah,
said.
Cisco.
No, Cisco is. What do you think for case management? I mean,
there wasn't case management.
oh,
So it's
wow.
like manual, a lot of manual.
So yeah, basically we knew that there were calls and how many were coming in, but we didn't know who was calling. When I say we don't know who was calling, we had no context going into the call.
Yeah, that must have been maddening for your customers. If you call back the third time and there's no history.
Yeah, that's obviously like a place where we had a lot of ground to cover. So we needed a solution in place. And like I said, that once we started collecting that data, it became very obvious. All right, here's where we need to focus to help our agents out. That's why we built that Lightning Web component to help surface that account and transaction data, because that's the number one reason why people are calling us. That's the easiest way we can help our agents. And then, as mentioned before, and now we can actually see, oh, hey, so-and-so has called in 3 times about this lost debit card, right? We need to make sure that we get this taken care of, or anything like that. And, we also haven't talked about, just surfacing that data on the other side of the house too, right? Not just from a customer service perspective, but for our lending assistants and our bankers, they have access to that data too. So if one of their customers happens to call into the call center, now they know. Now they know that, hey, my client called in about this, and I can follow up and make sure that was taken care of, and it helps your customer, right? And it just creates a richer experience for everybody, and everyone's on the same page.
I might be asking a really stupid question, and I'll take the heat off it because it might be a stupid question, but why not just use Sales Cloud and then just have a rep leave the note? Like, hey, spoke to customer Andy Wirtner, doing a credit card check-in balance, good call, he's happy with the service, leave note. Like,
well, I'll make it a little bit better. Instead of a note, an activity, at least a phone call activity.
Right.
Like surely you could just do that in standard Sales Cloud, no? Like I'm talking like pre like ServiceNow voice, like as from a case management perspective. Could you like am I being so naive maybe that it's just not that simple? I don't know, but
So I think the reason, so you could easily have people go in and make an activity and say, talk to so and so, help them out with their transaction. The I think what Service Cloud does in general is helps you. It opens up you to those different channels, right? That's the platform to get all those different channels in. Because if we didn't use Service Cloud, we'd be stuck basically with taking a phone call and then manually bringing it
yeah,
over into Sales Cloud. But with Service Cloud, right now it's just on the a voice channel. But since we're building this now in Service Cloud, that gives us the options to look at other service channels too, right? Like email, text, those kind of things. It's just the scalability is obviously much better in that architected solution.
for sure. Yeah, I was thinking more like when you talk about kind of having no history at all, right? That time because you were using Salesforce since 2013, right? So I was thinking more like from that period, 2013, 2017. Would that not just be the answer at that time? But I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, so that's also where you have to talk about like the incentive for people to actually put things
true.
in the system too, right? Are you going to use the carrot or the stick method with getting data into your CRM?
Yeah.
And at least with Service Cloud, right, that's automated for them. So they get a case pop, they go through they complete their customer authentication, boom, case is made. They're filling out a couple fields and you're done. You have compliance all the way down the line. It's a little bit harder to tell people like, hey, remember to put in your activities. Just
Yeah.
remember to do it because we need you to
It,
do it. It's a lot easier if you build a process so they have to do it in order to to keep everyone on the same page.
yeah. I
What do
mean,
they
it's
do
what. Go on.
right now? Because now it pops, opens a case, I assume automatically, or no, they have to click create case. But does it automatically create a phone call at least and then associate it to a case if they create a case?
Yeah. So what happens is call comes in and makes a voice call record. So that record
Right.
is created automatically. Essentially, we give them if there's a customer. We'll just assume there's a customer match. If there's a customer match that comes up, um, basically it walks them through a script of what they're going to say. That way, everyone gets uh, the wonderful PlainsCapital experience when they come through our call center. And they ask, so there's some generic questions. They ask you basically what their needs are, and then it walks them through um, our identification process. Like asking for things like debit card numbers, security questions, all that stuff. And then once they're completed through that, they either indicate that the customer was authenticated through our process or not authenticated. And at that point, the case is created, and we link that voice call to that case.
Got it.
But it always ends up in two end states, either an authenticated caller or an unauthenticated caller, but both create a case.
So we talked a little bit about the past and the present. We just want to spend the next 5 minutes or so talk about the future. The future PlainsCapital, Salesforce footprint and products. What does that look like? What are you guys working on that you can share? For the future, it doesn't have to be Service Cloud, but across the board.
Sure. Great question. So we've got two clouds that we're potentially looking at expanding into during the year. The first one, which would make sense, would be Financial Services Cloud. Obviously, as a bank, that'd be our industry vertical that we would take advantage of. But as mentioned, we've been on Salesforce for so long that we created a custom implementation prior to Financial Services Cloud even existing. So we're going to be going through a process where we migrate all that into FSC over time. So there's one thing that's on our future roadmap. And then the second one would be into Experience Cloud. Right now, we don't have any kind of customer-facing Experience Cloud site from the bank's perspective. So we're looking at leveraging that for a couple of different projects that we have or requirements that we've been given. One being more of a compliance-driven project, and then another one for document retrieval.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about? You touched on Agent Force in the rapid round. So what are your thoughts on Agent Force and where that might potentially be an option for you as a bank, or in banking in the industry in general? I would say.
I think the industry is a good candidate for AI. There's so much data that gets generated in a financial service industry company, right? There's so many facets. I mean, our that custom object that I mentioned, has 600, 700 custom fields on it, right? So I can only imagine the kind of things that AI could help us glean and leverage when we're interacting either from a sales perspective or a customer service experience perspective. Excuse me. One of the big hurdles though is that you obviously, in order to use Agents Force, you have to be on Data Cloud too, if I understand that correctly, right? So, Maz, is that what you understand to be
My
the case?
understanding is you don't.
Oh,
If you have the data all in Salesforce and you are bringing it into Salesforce, a lot of it, so you probably can get away with it, not using it.
well, obviously, I'm still kind of early in that journey, so we'd have to hash all that out. But yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of rich data in there. So I'm sure there's plenty of avenues we could take something like Agent Force to use.
Yeah, I just had a quick Google as well, and same as what Maz said. Technically, I don't think you do, but it's advisable, recommended that you use Data Cloud to truly get Agent Force's capabilities and so on. But maybe that's a question for your account exec, a future date maybe. But
Oh, I,
but
I
I'm
know what
sure
their
there's a
answer will
workaround.
be. I know what their
No
answer will be.
comment.
So here's
That's
an off question, somewhat tongue in cheek. You having an issue, let's say, I don't know if issue is the right word, where they want to hear their balance from a person, right? They want to check the portal, they want to check the app. Any concerns? They're not going to want to hear it from a robot either. They don't want to hear from a person.
Oh, definitely. I mean, there's always going to be that segment of people that just they want to hear, they want to talk to a person. Um, so that's part of our future roadmap. Because we are looking at redoing our IVR, is you have to make sure that you're not blocking your customers from ever reaching a real person, because some things people just aren't comfortable discussing with a bot.
I think it's pros and cons, right? It's generational as well.
Mhm.
I think I had an experience recently with a CD account which was like maturing, and it's this grace period. You kind of re-go, and they could see it was like my third time. I was doing renewing it, and so on. They knew the amount that was the initial capital, and it does make your life a lot easier as a customer, not having to explain it every time you're on a call. So I can
Mhm.
see that benefit. But again, if I just want a quick, I lost my card. I, I don't really need to speak to anyone about that. I just want to click a button, right? So I think it
Mhm.
depends on the query and it depends on the
Sure.
person as well. But slightly shifting off that topic. Meetups, events, whether they're banking or Salesforce, have you got any kind of plans for, I don't know, Dreamforce or other banking events this year as an individual or as a company?
That's a good question. It's been a while since I've been to Dreamforce. I think the last time I was in 2019, so pre-COVID. Would love to get back there. But then again, now that they stream a lot of these events, on Salesforce Plus, it's a lot more accessible. So I don't have any specific plans at this point, but I'm sure some will come up.
Yeah, we'll keep inviting you to our local North Dallas Salesforce meetups as well. So hopefully we'll see you there this year. But
Sure.
and then if people didn't listen to the rapid round, they're going to think, how the heck are we asking this question? Where is it coming from? But it's interesting about you. So tell us about the martial arts stuff, because that's obviously something very different to your tech
Yeah.
passion. How
Yeah.
did that start? Where did that kind of go into?
Sure. Yeah. So essentially, that started in middle school for me when I realized that there was no way that I was going to be able to play sports at a high school level. Just wasn't in the cards for me. The two sports that I played growing up, I wasn't going to cut it at a high school sport. So I was looking for an individual sport. Had some friends of mine at the time that started in Taekwondo. So I joined. Like I said, it would have been the fall. I guess it would have been the fall of 2001, and then I just never stopped. I always joke with my friends that it tricks me into working out. I need something that like that keeps me active, and it's always been good just from a social perspective as well. I made a lot of lifelong friends and wonderful relationships with people all across the country doing that as my sport.
So you picked it because it was an individual sport and not a team sport. That's what you're saying?
Well, yeah, it's something that I could do, for long term, right? I mean, of course, I could do rec league basketball and that kind of thing, but at the time, I was like, well, I can do this, and you don't get cut from an individual sport, right? So
I suppose
Goes back
don't
to
have to
your.
work well with people either.
I put you down, Maz, as an individual. Individual. If you had to pick a sport, you'd pick an individual sport.
Um, I'm just not athletic.
I don't know. I
Yeah,
like team sports. I like being with other people. But like you said, you meet people through it, Andy. So
yeah, yeah,
it's
oh,
best of both worlds, right? You compete as an
yeah,
individual. Your results are based on you as an individual, but you meet other people as well. And it's very
exactly.
very similar to your answer about your preference between independent contributor and manager. You kind of gave us the best of both worlds. Same with
Yeah,
the sport. So
yeah.
all right. Any last thoughts on your end, Andy, in general, that you think would be useful for our listeners? Any
You,
advice, any tips, I don't know, we always get a lot of like hiring trends for the year, inquiries, anything that comes to mind.
I mean, the marketplace it's always hard to find good talent, especially depending upon your company's requirement around status as a citizenship status in the country. So that can be a big hurdle for a lot of hiring sometimes. But in terms of like a tip, I think this kind of goes back to one of the other rapid fire questions was whether or not Salesforce should sit in IT or with the
Hmm.
business. And I'm a big proponent of that sitting with the business because it goes back to my own personal experience as a potential end user, right? Help me leverage Salesforce going on and into the future. And at the end of the day, Salesforce is a tool for our end users, and my team being embedded with our end users and being not separated from this IT firewall just helps us be more responsive to the needs of our internal customers, because we see their day to day, and we're aligned with them, and we're aligned with whatever initiatives that the bank's working on.
Do you? This will be the last question for you. Then you can breathe, relax. But do you think that? Do you see that? Because obviously you must talk to other banks and network and collaborate. So, do you see that as often with other banks as well? Whereas Salesforce sits, it's more with the business versus technology. Is that a banking thing or?
I think you'd probably find a variety of answers on
Okay.
on that, and I think it just really depends on how Salesforce was implemented and how management views the tool, right? So I I don't think it's specific to banking that one way or the other. I think you'd see the approach pretty pretty across the spectrum there.
Hmm. Interesting. Well, Andy, thank you. Thank you for your time. We really appreciate you sharing your experiences with us today. Hopefully, you found it enjoyable as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
yeah. Thank you, Andy.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, if you enjoyed what you heard today, please do not forget to subscribe to the CRM Success Show for more episodes featuring leaders like Andy, who are truly shaping the future of the CRM space. You can also follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube for additional updates and exclusive content. Thank you.